Hi, Jamie.
Hey, Jeff.
Craig. Right or wrong, we don't care. Win or lose, we don't care. We don't care. We don't care. We don't care.
Jamie.
Jeff.
What is that, my man?
Another day in paradise.
Well, it's true for you, man. You live in Pullman, so that's...
Not the last couple days. It's been anything but paradise.
Yeah, what's the weather like?
We had flood warnings earlier in the week.
Ooh.
I mean, it was beautiful. It wasn't that warm today, but it was beautiful. I mean, it was 45 yesterday, but like the weather app said it felt like 21. It was so windy.
Oh. Yeah, those are the fun ones where it's like it feels like 20 degrees colder than what it actually is. They didn't cancel school, did they?
No. Not, I mean,
okay, of course not.
Not that I know of. There have been times in the last...
You're like, I'm not a student anymore. How the hell would I know that?
Right. The last couple of years, I'll go to campus just to work or something and realize, oh, school was canceled. Or I'll go on like a holiday or something and have like no idea. Yeah. 60 on Saturday though, which is incredible.
We did have a day of canceled school when I was in school back in the late 90s.
We had one as well.
Yeah, what happened? I don't know. Probably same thing happened with you. Maybe not. I don't know. Ours it wasn't because of the snow. It was because we had a really fast melt and everything was flooded. Like the whole downtown was flooded. Like nobody could get in and out, on and off the hill. So they canceled school because none of the professors could make it in, especially the ones that like lived in Moscow and stuff.
I'm trying. It was my second year here. My redshirt freshman year, as I describe it as.
Yeah.
It wasn't snow. I want to say, I think it was like the roads were so icy.
Yeah.
That they were just like, no, this isn't safe.
Yeah.
And I think if memory serves, it was the same night the Cougs played Utah at home, and I just remember that game because that was the game where it was probably the worst loss of the Ernie era because they lost by 41.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that.
Yeah, Kuzma.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah, Kuzma and Lorenzo Bonham. Yeah. It was 88-47 was the final. There was a lot of losses. And then that was one of those inexplicable, okay, we've lost however many in a row. We look like absolute garbage. Here comes, it doesn't matter what Colorado team they're coming to Pullman, they're going to lose.
Yeah. Well, and it was, I mean, we're going to talk a lot tonight about shitty losses because that's kind of all we have to talk about at this point. But I know before we get to that though, just a few reminders. Number one, remember we got a newsletter that goes along with the podcast. So if you are a subscriber to the podcast, either on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, right? We got video on YouTube. We're uploading these to YouTube now. If you subscribe in both those places, make sure you also subscribe to our newsletter, podcastvseveryone.com. I do a ton of writing there. Sent out a newsletter this morning, in fact. So we're recording this on Wednesday night. Sent out a newsletter this morning trying to put how bad this spiral is into context, and we'll talk about that in a sec too. But to make sure you get everything, get the newsletter, subscribe to all these things. And by the way, the more places you subscribe, the more it helps us out. So if you like the show, if you can like and subscribe and all that stuff in the different places, that's definitely helpful. We also offer a premium membership, which will give you access to a premium message board. Basically, it's on Slack for people in the business world who know what that is. It's basically a giant message board. Jamie hangs out there. I hang out there. Craig hangs out there. Jamie joining me as a co-host again this week. But you can come and talk about it with us, talk about it with everybody else. About 100 of us in there, talking Cougs all the time, sharing information, venting, crying, laughing, all the good stuff. So with that, and by the way, I did not give Jamie a proper introduction tonight, so my co-host again tonight, Jamie Vinnick from CougFan.com, Pullman Bureau Chief, Jamie Vinnick. Hold on, I got to do this. Maybe. Is it going to work? Oh, come on. Play. Oh, there it goes. I thought I was being clever using the sound effect. What's funny about the sound effect, by the way, is it kind of goes on for an uncomfortably long amount of time.
I was going to say, we're still going. Okay.
Oh, we're still going. It's still got another 15 seconds, man. You deserve all of this. You deserve all this. Like go to the Oscars. You stand there. They give you the standing ovation. I love this. All right. There you go. All right. So, Jamie, all right. So here's where we're at. The team, men's basketball. Let's talk men's basketball first. They really fucking suck right now. There's really no other way to put it, man. Like they lost by a combined 51 points in 2 home games. I don't care who you're playing. That's like, I mean, that is really, 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 really bad shit. They played Gonzaga, obviously, last Wednesday, Santa Clara on Saturday. You know, not going to super rehash those. The Gonzaga game we previewed last week, you know, it was very, we were very excited for it, right? Because Gonzaga had not been to Pullman in a long time, 10 years, right? And, you know, sold out crowd and all that stuff. And really within about 10 minutes, all the life had been sucked out of the building. By halftime, they were down by 21, 22, something like that, 24 maybe, something like that. And so by that, you know, the game was over, right? And then they come out against Santa Clara on Saturday, which I will fully cop to the fact that I did not watch 1 minute of that game. I was in Seattle. So my youngest has his 13th birthday this week. And so we went to Seattle spent all day in Seattle. We went to Easy Street Records. We went to Pike Place. We went to Mopop and jammed on some instruments, and then went to the Sounders that night. So I watched 0 minutes. But what was different for me was that I was just like, I mean, I didn't even like try to avoid the score. Normally I'll do that. I'll be like, all right, I'll try and avoid the score all day. I'll get home. I know it's going to be late, so I'll watch it Sunday morning when I get up at, 6 a.m. or whatever, because I'm old. And I just didn't even try. And so I flipped open my app at halftime, and it was like, oh, God. Right? And so rather than get into the weeds of like exactly what happened in those games, because, honestly, I don't think anybody cares. I think if they watched it, they know what happened. It's the same old stuff, right? Like very difficult time defending. We talked about that last week. Very difficult time rebounding. The defending in particular. The funny thing is, in the 2 games, the defending problems were completely different problems, right? Like against Gonzaga, couldn't defend the interior. Against Santa Clara, couldn't defend the 3. But defending the issue, offensive rebounding for the other team, obviously, or defensive rebounding for us, obviously an issue there. I guess the logical place to go with this, as uncomfortable as the conversation is to start like, do we need to start asking questions about David Riley? And it's really uncomfortable, and nobody wants to do it. Well, I mean, okay, let me rephrase. Some people probably want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's not really like a thing I'm relishing here. I'm not trying to get a guy fired, but also like, I mean, it's incredible where we went from Ann McCoy talking about, we're already talking extension, 10 games into the year, and where we're at now. And so, like, since you're around the team a lot, like what can you share about, like, say, let's just say, like, the vibes around the program with the players, with the coaches, kind of where, because, I mean, obviously the results are horrible, which suggests that maybe the vibes are quite bad.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to, just a terrifying stat to add to all the terrifying stats. You said 51 points in combined losses these last 2 games. In his last 3 years here, Kyle Smith lost his home games by a combined 56 points. So that's
a good one.
Include the St. Mary's game too.
And I was kind of wondering, honestly, I'm sure that, the SID has this somewhere, but I was really kind of wondering what, like, they probably don't want to look this up, but what the record is for 2 games in a row at home.
Oh, I mean, we were just talking. I don't think we were live yet about the game where Ernie lost to Utah by They actually won the next game, but they had lost the previous home game by 19. So that's 2 games. Okay, and
that would be it.
60 points.
Yeah,
I don't know. My freshman year, there has to be. We could spend years and hours doing this. Yeah, they lost 16.
Yeah,
it's not a ton.
No.
Because, I mean, yeah, as I wrote in my article, not even an Ernie team gave up 109 points. I mean, you got to go back to Graham to find.
Yeah.
But at least
I mean, even when they lost in Ernie's last year to number 112 Stanford, they only lost by 48.
And that was on the road.
That was on the road though. That's true.
That's
right. That's a good point. That was on the road.
Era because
that's right.
Wazoo lost by 48 to Stanford. UW, who won the league that year in the worst year of the Pac-12 ever, lost to like number 279 Cal, and it was like, okay, what was the worst? Which loss was worse? Was it UW losing to that Cal team, who then 2 days later beat Wazoo, or was it and then beat the Stanford team? No, it was that Stanford game. I think it was at that moment where everyone realized, okay, this isn't happening again. We're not going back to this.
And this is what I want to like this is why we have to have this conversation.
Yes.
Right? Because this is the company we're keeping right now.
Right.
And it's like it blows my mind that this is what we're talking about, but also this is what we're talking about. And the company that this team is keeping at this moment is the kind of company that's like the very worst moments in the last, decade of Cougar basketball. Ernie Kent, one of the worst coaches that our program has ever employed. Our advanced stat databases and stat sites and things like that, there's like a couple of Paul Graham seasons in
very early days of Ken Pom.
In Ken Pom, yeah. But even then it's like the data's kind of sparse. It's basically like whole season data, not really like you kind of can't get granular on the games, right?
No.
But it's like, but this is what we're talking about. We're talking about Paul Graham, we're talking about Ernie Kent, and it's like, man, and I hate to bring up, so like maybe, and this is kind of the other thing that, is maybe uncomfortable, but like, when he got hired, there was a little bit of like, oh man, the last guy we hired from Eastern didn't work out so great, which is true.
Yes.
Which is true. Paul Wolf didn't work out so great, right? But it's like, okay, come on, that's silly to worry about that. But also, like, Paul Wolf's first season, like you were kind of like, I mean, not you specifically, but we collectively were sort of like, and you try and talk yourself into all kinds of things. But honestly, one of my biggest takeaways from Paul Wolf's tenure, God bless him, super nice guy, bad coach. It's like, when you see that it ain't there, man, it ain't just like acknowledge that it ain't there.
Yeah.
And we are like, we have to have a conversation about being in that territory with David Riley right now.
No,
it's so bad.
I don't disagree on that. The one thing I would say when you kind of look at the two of them is, you've seen even this year, you did see the flashes of.
Yeah.
I mean, we were just talking about there was extension talks, whereas with Wolf it was never there. At least it was.
Right.
I mean, it's not like he started. Oh, he had a 6-6 ring, a 5-7 season. Like it started as one of the worst Pac-12 teams ever.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Continued into over and over again the worst Pac. I mean, he won, what was it? I think 4 or 5 conference games. It always killed me last year when people would say, would compare the way that the team collapsed last year to a Wolf. It was Wolfian. Like, no. Paul Wolf. Like Paul Wolf was that bad.
Yeah, there was no collapse with Paul Wolf. Yes. It was just bad start to finish.
I think
right?
Paul Wolf beat one team in his entire tenure with a winning record,
Yeah.
And it was actually one of the most inexplicable wins ever because it was over an SMU team with like Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders that went 8-5 under June Jones, and like it actually made no sense. But
Yeah.
you
Turnovers are a hell of a thing, right?
they sure are. Oh yeah. I think that's where I just hesitate, and I do think that I think one of the tough things for me when we talk about it is finding the balance between, on one hand, the way they have played the last what's it been now, almost 2 months. Can't happen. It's not good enough. It's not just the. I think it's funny that if you look at the results and you just flip the Pacific games, results wise, I don't think it was crazy out of the question to have lost the games they have. The problem is the manner in which they're losing it.
Right. It's the way you lose.
Exactly. If they lose by 6 to Santa Clara, hold on, San Francisco for the lead. Gosh.
I know. We're both watching this game.
Yeah,
we both have it on the side. San Francisco, Oregon State. Oh, San Francisco for 3. Oh, my gosh.
Who the heck?
You're ahead of me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. This is great. This is great podcasting right here.
I have no idea who that was. That's not one of their normal guys, I don't think.
I don't know, man, but that put them up by 2. All right, we got timeout, Oregon State. Okay, back to Washington State.
Raymond Abosi. I don't even think he played against Wazoo. No, he played 23.
Might not have.
Anyways, I think if they lose by 6 to Santa Clara, they lose, the St. Mary's home game. If it was just a bunch of games like that where it's just like
totally,
they're just not there. They lose by they get the Gonzaga road game. Like to me is a fine result. You lose by 13.
Totally, totally defensible.
Yes,
they were good. They were fine for a half. Hung with them for a half. Gonzaga came out and blitzed them in the second half. That happens.
Yeah, it's Gonzaga. They're at the kennel. They've lost like 10 times there since, I think maybe it's 11 now, since like 2009. They don't lose there. And even like, the San Francisco game, but it's these last couple of games. It's especially the Gonzaga and the Santa Clara games where you're not even in the games. And those are good. Obviously Gonzaga is quote unquote down for their standards, and they're number 9 in KenPom. Like Santa Clara is, I think, like in Lenardi's next 4 out, like to a point where they're probably dead now. But if they had beaten Gonzaga yesterday, who knows?
Yep.
But the issue is they're down 39-14 10 minutes into the game. They don't even last 10 minutes against Gonzaga. They come out of half just flat against St. Mary's, and that game's over. They played 18 minutes against San Francisco, and then they're toast. Yep. Obviously, it's the Pacific losses. It's the Santa Clara loss out on the road where you're not even close. Parsafala. Oh, we missed it. San Francisco's going to win it. Ooh, did he get it off in time? Sorry. Anyways. This is close. So you get the replay.
How did he miss that?
Does he get the
Holy crap. Oh, my gosh. How did he miss it? And then that one's definitely late.
Is that okay? I didn't get the live.
Hold on, I'm looking. I'm watching. But I can't believe he missed that layup, man.
Oh, right?
No, it's late.
That's
way late.
So many when the Cougs played him.
How do you miss that layup? Anyway.
No, he didn't get that off. Anyways, so
yeah. It's the manner, right? Like that's the big thing. I mean, let me hit you with a couple things here. A couple things I put in the newsletter, and then one other quick thing. So one thing I put in the newsletter was that, let's see here. Hold on. Now I gotta find it. What I was going to put in here. Oh yes. In these last, in the games against the top 5 teams in the WCC standings. Okay. So we're talking Gonzaga, St. Mary's, USF,
Santa Clara,
Gonzaga, St. Mary's, USF, Santa Clara, Oregon State, right?
Yep.
So those are the top 5 teams. Cougs are 1-8, they got 1 win over San Francisco
with 8 straight losses.
Yes, and their average margin in those 9 games is minus 17.6, and that includes in that margin includes a 9-point win over or 8-point win over San Francisco.
Right. And that's also just notable note at 2 of those games, the opponent didn't have their leading scorer.
Yes, there was that also. So it's like you said, it's the manner. So What concerns me about it is the inability to even stabilize as this thing is spiraling, and that's a coaching issue, right? Like that's the players play, no doubt the players play, but it's a coaching issue when the coach cannot figure out a way to stabilize this thing and get the team out of the tailspin. What I've seen is now I'm not a coach, I will never profess to be an X's and O's guy. I leave that shit up to Bryce Hendricks when he writes. He can handle that. But what I can say is that he's doing very little different with his personnel. No change up in the starting lineup, no real change in the rotations other than really on the fringes. Vavers maybe playing 10 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever, but this is really like fringy on the margin stuff that doesn't really make a lot of difference. And it's not like I'm not a guy who's like, change for the sake of change, but also like, I mean, if something's not working, maybe you try at least a little different combination. I mean, the truth is they played their best. I shouldn't say their best. They were playing pretty okay ball until Isaiah Watts came back and he went into the lineup and things got way worse. Now, I'm not saying that's his fault. Somebody will probably take that out of context. What I am saying is you took Thrasterson out of the starting lineup to put Isaiah back in, and the minutes got flipped also, right? Like Thrasterson was, playing 20 plus minutes. Now he's maybe playing 10. Like, okay, so you're those minutes are zero sum. They're going somewhere. And so you've now replaced basically a small forward / power forward type guy with a shooting guard who can't penetrate, right? Like he's a jump shooter only. And so like that really changes the calculus of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's not like I'm saying that's the solution. I'm just saying like it's strange to me that they're in this tailspin, haven't really done anything with personnel. I'm sure they're doing tweaks with scheme, but it's like his inability to kind of pull the team out of it, or at least get them to like stabilize at a baseline level, or at least raise the floor a little bit. Like all those things tell me like, my God, like, and then multiple things probably, right? Like it's, when it's this bad, it's probably not, just one thing, right? Like we kind of honed in on the defense last week. Probably lots of things. Like, I don't know. What it suggests to me is like be a team that's not playing hard for each other. Like that's kind of where I'm at on this. And I don't know, like, do you feel like that's off base, or do you feel like that's, cause again, I'm 300 miles away from the team, but I don't know, man, when a team wilts as hard as they wilt, they're just not playing for each other.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of kind of pieces to what you just said. I think the one thing I will know when it comes to Zay and Thrasterson is, first off, Thrasterson, since being pulled out of the starting lineup, has played 20 minutes in all but 2 games, and when he played 19. The other was against Oregon State, which, with the way the flu was going around that team, it very well could have been. He got hit 7 minutes, 3 fouls, no other stats.
I know he had it. I'm pretty sure they said he had it that game.
So I don't know, and I do think when you look at the schedule too, it's like, Zay's first game back was, what was it? Was it Santa Clara? Was that his?
I believe
it was Pacific on the road. So it
Pacific on the road, yeah.
With them facing the tougher teams, whereas Thrasterson starts,
and that's true.
2 Portland, San Diego, the first Pacific game, LMU, etc. So I do think there's something interesting there, and one of the things I was kind of alluding to when we were talking about what has happened is, it's tough, I think, to find a balance between what we were saying. Yeah, like they're not playing well enough. There's a lot of things to be concerned. But I do think there is still the factor of how many, I think it's more of a question than anything, and we'll never know the answer, but how many of these concerns, how many of these issues are alleviated with Coward? I mean, the fact of the matter is, look, it doesn't, with Coward, without Coward, you can't lose 2 games at home by 50-plus points. You can't lose twice to Pacific. Mm-hmm. But I do wonder how many of these things, starting with the rebounding, to the turnovers, to the overall defense, because of how many different positions he could guard, and then I think to the mentality. I think the guy that they counted on, to be their driving force in all those categories is in street clothes. And the
Yep.
counter to that is you need to build a roster better to where it doesn't depend on that one guy. But what I have said before, and I think, and it's not a perfect science or a perfect comparison, but what does Kyle's first year look like if CJ is hurt in November? What is that? I mean, it's
Sure.
Again, we don't know. And think about it this way: is CJ's leadership responsibilities weren't what SEDS were supposed to be. But do I think that team would have fared better? Yes, because I think Kyle just is experienced and sees enough to push the right buttons and figure out what he needed to do. But I do think a lot of it is that, and Riley said something along the lines on Saturday that that maybe they'd run out of steam, and then he kind of elaborated on that today and said there was that stretch of time where they had 8 healthy players, and sometimes when you get 8 players, you're not looking over your shoulder. Nate can go, if Nate throws the ball away 9 times, what are they going to do? Give the minutes to, take on Sessoms? No.
Right.
You're not getting, you still have to play those guys. And the one thing I've appreciated a lot with Riley is he's been very, very candid about the issues. I mean, he's not,
for sure.
It's not the Jake Dickert, that's on me, I got to coach better. I mean, he puts the blame on himself, but the manner in which he does it is he explains why. He said Saturday, maybe we skip some steps. And I think, and he talked about this after the Pacific game, that guys started, the ego started to build a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that right there is, okay, where's your leader in that situation? Well, he's been in street clothes since November. And that's the guy who, when the guys start to, and that's not to say Coward's not been present. He's been at the games, he's been at practices, but, it never came up last year, so we don't know. But, when the team last year started to get hot, you have to believe, whether it was Isaac or Jalen or Andre or someone was like, okay, focus in, heads focused. And I think that also came with, Kyle's however many years, 18 years older than Riley.
Yeah.
He's well seasoned. I mean, that's the other part with Riley is he is still very green as a head coach. I mean,
he is. No doubt.
If this was a guy in his 15th year and you're just like, yeah, this is what he is, it's a retread hire, it's not going to work, you move on.
Right.
I am not in the belief personally that you move on from him. And part of that is, I think there's the financial side you have to consider. It costs money to fire a coach. It costs money to do all these things. They don't necessarily have that kind of money. I also I think, again, it's not, you can't give him a mulligan, but I think there has been so many factors that, I mean, even what if this team has Marcus Wilson? I think that helps. Like, Marcus Wilson, I think Riley might have said this on his coach's show. Like, he only ended up playing, I think, 30 minutes a year. He didn't turn the ball over, which for this team, 30 minutes of that turnover is...
Yes, that's amazing.
That
would have helped.
Human. So, if we're having this discussion next February at this time, I think the discussion is different. At least for me, I think a lot of when he made his offseason plan, I think a lot of it was, okay, here is our team. We've got, the Eric Strips, the Prices, the Lawan Watts, the Isaiah Watts. Here's our nucleus. This is the guy that it all kind of orbits, and that's Coward. And that's not a great way to build a team. I will say that. I think you run into trouble if you try and build a team that way. It's why for however many years UW would get these 5-star one-and-dones and just fall in their... It's happening this year. Everything orbits around Osibor, and they're terrible. It's really not that relevant to the point I'm making. I just wanted to throw that in there just so we're all clear that they're last in the Big Ten. But
just so we're all clear, UW fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Continue.
Just ignore that they beat Wazoo by 16. Cedric didn't play, but I think on one hand, like, that changed the calculus of the season. But I do think on the other hand, it's going to have to be a learning experience for Riley in the sense of, because that's not how his Eastern teams were constructed. Like, they had some of the same players, but
extremely egalitarian, lots of contributions, very balanced.
Right. Like, their highest guy in usage last year, I'm pretty sure, was Eric Struck. And mostly just because the time he's on the floor.
Yeah, whenever he came in, it was like bombs away.
Like, Coward was 21% of possession. Like, he was 4th in their possessions last year in terms of usage, behind Eric Strupp, Price, and Jones. Another factor that I think maybe we undersold is how important he would have been from a toughness, a leadership, and a defense.
Yeah, Casey Jones. Yeah.
He would have helped things.
Yeah.
But again, if we're having this conversation at this time next year, then you probably need to start making the look. I just don't think after 1 year with the best player injured, and not to mention another, your sixth man hurt for 10 games, a couple of your top bench guys missing, either all the season or most of the season. I think there's things to take of, okay, this was like, we need to do this, that, and the other. Like, I think Riley needs to show that he learned. Like, I'm not sitting here saying they got to make the tournament next year or he's gone. I think, but they need to show improvement. There needs to be signs of next season. Okay, we learned that we need, a true 25, 30 minutes a night back to the basket post player. We need a little more mental fortitude, a little bit of leadership. We need a guy who is not going to turn the ball over. How valuable was a Jalen Wells to last year's team because he literally didn't turn it over, mostly because when he touched it went up. But so I think he needs to show, and I think the offseason is where it starts. He needs to show that he can find the mold of guys that that it's not a bunch of square pegs in round holes. To work at Washington State, it can't just be amassing the talent and having them figure it out. This isn't Duke. You're not going to get that good enough talent to do that. Look at Kyle's 2022 team. That team honestly, maybe outside of last year, may have been one of his more talented teams. When you had Bamba, you had Mo, you had F.A., you had Flowers, who was obviously an elite college scorer. But until the end of the season, when Flowers kind of took the leadership role, that was that team. Well, we forget before the NIT run.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the newsletter. Right. Yeah. They stumbled really bad. And I will say, by the way, I think that team, to kind of to the point we've been making, that team is another great example of what can happen when guys aren't playing hard for each other. Yeah. And you've got factions on the team, right? Like, I don't think I'm spilling any beans by saying that, like, Noah Williams was a bit of a problem on that roster and in that locker room.
I will say I still love Noah, but
right? Like we all love what he did, and also, there were some issues there, and until the torch was fully passed to Flowers, and it was like, no, you're the guy, and you need to take this role, and also we're going to basically eliminate Noah's minutes. All of a sudden, the team takes off, right? And that's where I look at Riley and I go, if anything, that's the lesson I hope he learns from this year. Is like you just have, like, ostensibly that 2022 team is better, right? In quotation marks, better with Noah Williams on the floor.
Yes.
Right? But they were clearly not better with Noah Williams on the floor. And so you end up, like, finally Kyle Smith is like, and this is why I think his teams always got better. Yeah. Is like he would sort of figure out who could play with whom, what they could do. And he would essentially fine tune his rotation. And at times it would result in some, like, decisions where you just kind of scratch your head a little bit.
Yep.
But it worked. The one, and I hate to call it a stick, even though it is kind of a stick, but the one, thing that a coach has in his control is who's on the floor.
Yeah.
Right. Like everything else is you're depending on the players to pull it off. But the one thing you always have control over is who plays. And at times, man, you got to be willing to make decisions about who plays and who doesn't. And you got to be willing to sit a guy, and you got to be willing to play maybe a less talented guy for a time or for a long time. I mean, how many times did we see? And this is, again, it's going to be impossible to get away from Kyle Smith comparisons. But how many times did we see over the last couple of years where Kyle would, essentially bench a guy for long periods of a game or the end of a game, or he'd ride the hot hand, with a guy who was playing, maybe a guy who didn't play quite as much, but had a hot hand. Or even like last year, a great example is Oscar Clough, right? So important to their success for the first half of the season. And then they get into Pac-12 play, and it's just not super working with him. And so they move away from him. He's playing a lot fewer minutes, and they, of course, they take off and everything. Team's playing great. Clef is a wonderful teammate, playing hard for everybody. He transfers, goes to South Dakota State, and he's like one of the best players in at a mid-major school, right?
I sat Isaac Jones for a game last year.
Yeah, right.
Isaac had a bad week against the Oregon schools. I think if I remember correctly,
yep.
Kyle said he was under the weather. I'm looking right now. He had 2 games. He had 11 points, 9 rebounds. So he didn't start. Yep. They brought Isaac Jones off the bench, and he has 26 and 11.
Yep.
They beat USC, and he plays 34 minutes. But I do agree with that. The counter, I would say, though, is when they started the cut into Noah's minutes that year, they brought TJ Bamba instead, who, in hindsight, we all can agree was basically a much better Noah Williams.
Yeah.
I don't think you have that option this year.
No.
If, look, I don't think it's a secret. I don't think it's outlandish to say that, the roller coaster of the season can be kind of embodied by Nate Calmes. There has been
for sure
awesomeness. There has been great games where he's, he carried them to a win over against San Diego, but he carried them to that win.
Right.
The only reason they were in the game against Oregon State and Corvallis was because of him.
For sure.
He kept them in against Iowa and so on. And then he's had the 3 points, the 2 points. Yes, there was that stretch where he was like morbidly ill, as was the whole team in Pacific.
Yeah.
But 5 against St. Mary's, 5 against Gonzaga. The problem, I think, with that is you look at, you pull Williams, you put Bamba in. What's your option with this team? All love to Parker Garrett's. Kid works his tail off. He embodies what it means to wear that logo. But at the end of the day, there are certain things he can and can't do. He's got the highest turnover rate on the team. And, he doesn't have an assist rate of 14, which is pretty good. But it's not like, you can say, okay, Parker, that going from that switch, you can't say that with the argument of, we think Parker can give us better minutes than Nate. That's the sending the message type of thing. And I will say, at least against San Francisco on the road in that game that Nate was sick, Nate sat the entire half. LaJuan sat a good portion of the half. He has made, in some of these games that have gotten away, he has sat down guys. I just think that also goes to the point of, it's not like you've got, the guys, again, you look at the 2022 team, the guys who came off the bench, the primary bench options that year, you're talking about Andre, who started for a tournament team. You're talking about DJ, who, obviously was extraordinarily valuable. There were different games where either, a healthy Deshaun or TJ, you had very different options. And again, that goes back to some of the injuries we talked about, is he more willing to do said things if Marcus Wilson's available, if Stead's available. So I think there's a lot of things that I'm hoping he's learned throughout the season. And I do think he has, because the one thing I'll say about Riley that I have very much gotten the impression of is he's not a stubborn coach in the sense that he's, again, God love Mike Leach, but you knew what you were getting. It wasn't ever changing.
It's true.
I do think, Riley's willing to adapt. I just think it has at times been hard to do so this year just because of the personnel at his disposal at times because of all the injuries, and that's, again, it's a grand way of saying I still want to see what he can do with another year, another chance to kind of learn from his mistakes, build the roster this way, that way. The other thing I will point out, his first year at Eastern, they were 2-17 in KenPom. They were 18-16 and 11-9 in the Big Sky, which sucked. They had some great wins like they did this year. They beat Wazoo. They beat that 2022 Wazoo team we're talking about. They beat Montana State with Sprinkle and I think this is actually before, and a young Osabor, but a good Montana State team that went to the tournament. And, they gave Colorado all they could handle in Boulder, which not even Kyle Smith could ever do.
It's true.
And then they lose to Idaho, and they lose to Sacramento State. But then they come back the next year, and they win 23 games. And obviously, then, yes, you get to the next step of what would happen in the conference tournament, which I think you're seeing why maybe those teams could have those issues.
Not hard to see how they end up losing those games.
But, he came back the next year, won 23 games, beat Wazoo again in the NIT. Last year, obviously, they had that dreadful start because of the insane schedule they played. But, they played the Cougs fairly tight in Pullman. It was a 10-point game. They played Ole Miss tight. They played Cincinnati fairly tight. And they won 21 games. So if I do, and it was a lot of the same situation where he loses his entire team. I mean, that entire Eastern team that he inherited was gone. When he took over,
when Leggins left.
Yeah, Leggins left. They lost Robertson and Davison and the Groves and all those guys. It was almost an entirely new team besides Ellis Magnuson. Yep. And then the next year, he basically brought most of those guys back, I think with the exception of, I want to say, Ventures was on that team. But he basically brought all those guys back, and they were good. And so I'm very curious to see. I think the offseason will be very interesting. What kind of guys are going after the portal? And we've talked about this a little bit. Look at San Francisco. Who's their best player? Malik Thomas, USC transfer. Look at, Adama Ball, Santa Clara, Arizona transfer.
Yep.
It wasn't a great strategy when you're in the Pac-12 because you can't really be taking drop downs because if they didn't work at another Power 5 school, they might not work at
your Power 5 school, right?
Morauskas at St. Mary's, an Arizona transfer. But I think there's a way to find a mix of those guys while also finding the guys who are looking to step up a level. And, there's a lot of evidence. Look at Drake right now and their star player, whose name is escaping me, but he's a D2 guy. There's some evidence that D2 guys work. Jalen Wells, Cedric Coward, Dane Erickstrup. So I think there's a lot of avenues for him to show us next year that, okay, this was a 1 year. We're going to be able to get things corrected. We're going to be able to get things fixed. Yeah. Like I said, I know I've been rambling for a while now, but if we're talking the same way next year, then you probably look at, hey, we need to have a conversation.
I agree. And he's, if I remember right, he's on a 3-year contract, right?
I think I think you're correct.
So if a year from now we're looking at the same stuff, like I just want to be clear. Like I don't think he should be fired now. I don't think that's realistic or like possible or anything, or even that it should happen necessarily. And I do think it's worth, I think it's worth acknowledging, right? Like the whole WCC thing is weird, and we got another year of that before we move into the Mountain West. Like I get the whole situation is kind of strange, and whatever. But it's the warning signs where I'm like, is that a thing you're able to fix, or is that just inherent in the way he coaches? And I guess what I've seen is from this year is he's, for as flexible as he can be with certain things, he's not been flexible with others. Like he's, again, we've talked about the limitation with personnel, but at some point you have to be willing to be an asshole. And I don't know if he's got that in him. Like just watching the way that he has been just sort of like unflinchingly loyal to his guys from Eastern, which again, maybe that's why they all followed him. Maybe that's why they all love him. And maybe that proves to be a virtue in the end, but it's not a virtue. It's not a virtue right now. It's not a virtue this season.
Sure.
And, and again, maybe in future seasons that is the way forward and it pays off big time. But right now, his just, unwavering support of his guys, no matter how many times they turn the ball over, no matter how many times they miss a rotation, no matter how many times they're lazy getting back on defense, the unwillingness to go, you know what? Fuck you. Find a place on the bench. You're sitting for 10 minutes. That's too many fucking turnovers. Sit your ass down. I'll fucking play Parker Garrett's. Sit your ass down. Like at some point you got to be a little bit like, I think the great coaches, especially the ones at Wazoo, have all had some asshole in them. Kelvin Sampson, asshole, total asshole, right? Dick Bennett, 100% asshole, right? Tony Bennett, underrated for being an asshole. Like, I just want to be clear about that. Like, he's got a reputation, like St. Tony. He's got the St. Tony thing going on. But let me tell you, he's a fucking asshole. And he does it in a nice way. And he smiles and he says, God bless you while he's doing it. But he will not tolerate any bullshit. And then, Kyle. Maybe people don't know this. Kyle's kind of an asshole too. And in a great way, super nice guy, like wonderful community man. All the good things that we see are all true. But when it came to his team, he was not afraid to be an asshole. And I kind of wonder a little bit if David Riley's got that in him. Okay, let's move on.
So there's one more thing I do just.
Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned one of the first things you asked, and I went on a different tangent. You kind of asked the morale around the team, and I will say this: just before practice yesterday, it wasn't. There was still good energy with the team. The ND was. I mean, this is before practice. I don't want to say this is not what they're doing in practice, but
yeah.
ND's playing kind of a one-on-one game with a manager. Nate and Lawan are joking, or like they're still enjoying themselves. I think in that way, it's just and Riley said it himself. They're practicing well. They're having good practices. They're having intense practices. And he said, but we haven't been able to flip the switch into games. So I will say that it's not like you walk into practice and these guys are just absolutely depressed.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. So
That's good to hear.
I think there is still some, you seriously, if you didn't look at the record based on just the spirits and morale before practice, you would have thought, oh, this team's won 24 games or something. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, they clearly don't care, but I think it's important to, obviously they want to play better. I'm not doubting that, but I think it is important to still be able to be in high spirits, because at the end of the day, when you strip it all away, it's still supposed to be fun. It's still
supposed to be.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I hope I hope it pays off for him in these last couple of games. It's one of the reasons why, when I wrote the newsletter this morning, I was like, I don't want to go too far down the road of, what should we do with Riley? Because there's still at least 3 games left in the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we see something over these last 3 games that makes us think, okay, like he kind of figured it out. I don't know. But it's like, I want to leave that possibility open, even though we've sort of opened the discussion on this situation. So that's all good to hear. All right, let's hit beverages real quick. All right, so Jamie, what you got, my man?
Well, I sat back. I had my Fresca soda water sitting on my TV tray. It wasn't a beer night for me.
Going for the hard stuff tonight.
Oh yeah, no, it's just
not even any gin in it or anything.
No, I don't even. Oh god, I hate gin. I'm a whiskey guy all the way.
Between Craig and I love our gin and sodas, man. I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to rethink. Might have to rethink your presence on this podcast, my friend.
Most of my friends are the same way. It just doesn't. I don't know. It tastes like pine needles.
You know what? Okay, so my wife is like that. My wife is absolutely like that. She cannot stand gin. She's like, I taste like I'm drinking a tree. She's like, I don't want to drink that. And I'm like, no, it tastes great to me. It's like floral and whatever. Okay, now I got to ask you a question now. How do you feel about cilantro? Does it taste like soap to you?
No.
Okay, all right. Because that's what my wife deals with.
Now, there are bits and pieces of it. I don't want it. Like, there's a place where I go in Issaquah, and they put it on a sushi roll. I don't want it there.
That's weird.
It is a little weird. You put it in a burrito bowl. You use it to, give some flavor. I'm good with that. No, I can't at this point. If I'm drinking a hard drink, it's got to be either some kind of whiskey, bourbon, Scotch rye, or tequila, which is the funniest thing because all my friends, for the most part, after college, cannot drink tequila. And I drank tequila in college, and now I don't mind it.
Well, too many. I mean, the problem is in college, you end up poisoning yourself with terrible tequila.
Well,
the difference between terrible tequila and not terrible tequila is I'm not a huge liquor drinker, but I would say that I don't know, the delta between terrible tequila and not terrible tequila is bigger than a lot of other types of alcohol. Bad gin
fair.
Versus pretty good gin. It's I can house gin, I go to the Coug, house gin. Yeah, house gin's fine. Whatever. It's fine. House vodka, fine. Whatever. Tito's is great. Tito's tastes a little better, but is it that different? Not really, right? Vodka's vodka most of the time, right? Maybe bourbon, right? Whiskey's going to be different, right? Cheap whiskey versus expensive whiskey. That's probably the biggest one. But tequila, I feel is sort of in that ballpark. If you house tequila, no, thank you. Like when we were in Mexico, when Craig and I were in Mexico with our wives, it was, we were at an all-inclusive resort and, you make sure to ask for the not well tequila, right? You're asking for the the whatever reposado over there. Give me some of that with a soda, and that tastes good. So now I asked about the cilantro because my wife, she also she hates gin, and cilantro tastes like soap to her, and I was wondering if maybe there was some connection.
Not with me. Nope.
I
like cilantro, but yeah, no. For me, I can't drink vodka. Just too many bad memories from college.
Yeah, I get it.
That was the drink of choice, and now it's just
Our drink of punishment in our fraternity was Prairie Fires, which is house tequila with Tabasco sauce in it. So
hell no.
Yeah, that's disgusting, right? That's disgusting. So
I love that.
Yeah,
and I like tequila, but not together.
I'm pretty sure the last time I had one of those was on my graduation run when they took us on the pub crawl for graduation.
That's nice. My graduation run was the downstairs of my house.
Yeah, we went to we started at Shermer's. Started Shermer's back in the day. So you have no recollection of Shermer's. There's going to be people listening to this podcast. I know. People are going to be listening to this podcast going, "Oh yeah, we remember Shermer's. We started with a Shermerita. Which was a margarita and basically something the size of a fucking fish bowl, basically."
Oh yeah, well, that's a study glass. It's my era.
Yeah, and then my office, and then Rico's, and then over to Rancho for a Mexican flag, right?
Yeah.
So had to have one of those.
That's funny. I didn't go to Rico's until I graduated.
Yeah, we just did it to say. We just did it to say we did it. Like that was it. It's like, okay, we're just gonna hit all the bars downtown. Here we go. Go get a beer at Rico's. Go get a beer at my office, and then go get your Mexican flag. Where that's the one that really sends you over the edge, right? Like, because it's like you're like, okay, I've had a couple of beers. I had this big, Shermerita, whatever, which is just like a giant bowl of sugar, basically.
Yep.
And then you go to Rancho, and then you have the Mexican flag, and you're like, okay, all right. Well, now we've had some 151, so the night's officially started. And then you pile in the minivan and head up to Shakers, right? Not Mike's. Not Mike's, not Stubblefields, but Shakers. Head up to Shake, whatever it's called now. I don't even know what it's called now.
It used to be there used to be a top floor and a bottom floor. Now it's
right.
I think Emporium is on the bottom floor.
The Emporium, yes, on the bottom floor, yes.
I
made the mistake of going. Were you there when we went in there for Craig's bachelor party? When we went to the Emporium?
Yes. And everyone was looking like, who are these guys?
Who are these old fuckers? That's what they kept. Those were the looks.
That group because I feel young.
Right? You're young, and it's like, okay, you can pass. I cannot.
And that was
right. Like I got so much gray up in here. They were like, who's this old fucking creeper guy hanging out looking at all the people? I'm like, there's nothing else to look at, man. All this here is college girls. I have nothing else to look at. It's terrible.
Let's see, yeah. Ours was Cougs Thursday night for a couple of pitchers. Friday was probably Coug and V-Hall after class. Saturday was usually start drinking at one of my friends' houses and then end up at the Coug and V-Hall and studies by the evening. Sunday was get up, watch NASCAR, and pound a few beers.
There you go. Lots of Shakers for us because it was across the street from our fraternity. So that made it easy.
And then they had Stubblefields did the little $5 fish bowls on Tuesday, so that was always a terrible Wednesday morning. But
there you go.
Yep.
All right, hey, my beer tonight, the Galaxy Pilsner from Slow Hand Beer Company. So I'm assuming. Hold on, I was gonna say I'm assuming this is brewed in Canada because I bought it in Canada. Slow Hand Beer Company is in Vancouver. Interesting beer. It's a Pilsner, but honestly, it tastes kind of like it's a Galaxy Pilsner. So obviously with Galaxy hops, which is a pretty popular IPA hop. So it's a very hoppy Pilsner. It almost tastes kind of like a session IPA in a lot of ways. So sort of lighter, 5% alcohol. So it sort of tastes like, but it's good. It's very different. It's not, you're not really getting that classic Pilsner taste or lager taste. You're really, I don't know. It tastes very, the hops are very forward. Like you might expect more in an IPA type. So I will finish this soon. And then I will move on to my second beer, which is Of course, my old Crimson Legendary Lager.
Of course.
Hanging out in my my puffin koozie. I love these. And no, I'm not getting paid for this. I've tried to get a fucking sponsorship with these guys. Cause I'm like, look at these cool puffin things, right? Cause I got all these puffin koozies everywhere. Like, here's another one. Like, I love them. And also I don't get paid for that. So whatever, buy it or don't, I don't care. Whatever. Okay. Hey, let's talk football real quick. Maybe like 10 minutes here. Let's talk offensive line. Cause I feel like that's something I actually know a little bit about. Timeout. What are we timeout?
Screw the show up if I stand up to get something to drink.
A little, but you can do it. I'll just talk while you go do it. So
Okay, you just
how about that? Can you hear while I'm talking?
Yeah, my kitchen's like 10
Okay, see, there we go. All right, so as long as you can hear.
Perfect.
All right, so Jamie's getting up to get a drink. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk a little football. Spring practices are actually not very far away. It's already obviously the end of February. I don't even know what day spring practices start. Jamie will be able to tell you when he comes back. But I do know it's not very far away. And then, of course, the Crimson and Gray game is sort of late April at that point. I think we're probably about a month away from spring practices, right? Roughly.
If by a month you mean like 3 days, yes.
Oh, it starts in 3 days? For real?
Spring practice starts on Saturday.
Holy shit. Okay. All right. See, I didn't. There we go. They must be,
Lime,
like.
Seltzers.
Lime seltzer. Attaboy.
Sparkling water.
So they must be really spreading out the practices then. Yeah.
To a degree, yes. Sorry about that, sneeze. I know, I've just totally destroyed the show. No, because they're taking I think 11 days off for spring break, so there's no from the 6th to.
That makes sense.
Yeah, all of so they practice the the 6th, which is next Thursday. And I don't think they practice again until 15th, the 17th, which is the Tuesday after school starts again.
That makes sense.
So that's and basically the whole reasoning is they want to get stuff done before the portal opens on the 16th and have the ability to tell guys, hey, maybe you should enter, or hey, we really want to keep you, and then fend off as many of the poachers as possible. But and it's different this year because under Jake, everything was open, and that is not the case this year.
Oh, really?
It is open Saturdays. That's it. Tuesday, Thursday is closed.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, is that a policy that's going to apply into the fall as well, or is this just a spring practice thing?
I would think if it's in the spring, it certainly would be in the fall. I mean, that would.
I would think so too.
My kind of belief, but I mean, it said I think Rodgers just wants to keep things under wraps as much as he possibly can, and I think that's his way of doing it. So nothing's open until Saturday. Obviously.
So wait. If you walk up on the little landing up above the field at the football building, they're going to be like, Jamie, get out of here.
Probably, yeah. I mean, that happened to me when I was a student. Leach,
okay.
With Leach, I don't know how especially because I think they would recognize me.
You're a fairly distinctive individual.
Especially in Pullman. We were told, practice Tuesday, Thursday. It is closed. You can make individual media requests afterwards. Talk to players or coaches. But so it's they're definitely trying to keep things under wraps. I don't think you want someone have a big spring and then suddenly here come the poachers again, etc. So
I suppose that's fair. Although I do think that I don't know, man. I think that stuff's a little overblown, but
maybe.
But football coaches by nature are very paranoid.
So. Yes,
no doubt.
Yes.
All right, let's talk football coaches. Good God, let's talk offensive linemen. Let's talk offensive linemen first. So of the 5 starters last year, 3 have departed, which leaves 2, which are staying. So 2 presumed starters would be Christian Hilborn and Brock Dew. Those 2 guys, very experienced, both going to be redshirt seniors. So lots and lots of experience, lots and lots of snaps. And outside of that, it's like it's kind of a mishmash of transfers, lots of transfers, particularly from South Dakota State. A lot of the guys who were backups have also transferred out. A couple guys that I would imagine might be the sort of guys who jump in. One guy, Zach Miller, I would imagine would be a guy who's got something to say about some playing time. Who are some of the other guys in your mind that are going to be, potentially making some noise to compete for those other three spots? And by the way, Hilborn and Dew, I mean, who knows exactly where they end up, right? They both
Center and guard.
played. Is that what you think? It's going to be center and guard?
No, that's what Freund, the offensive coordinator, told me.
Okay, well, that's fantastic
Dew's
then.
gonna
All
be
right.
the center, Hilborn will play a guard spot.
All right, so the other guard and then two tackles. So kind of
Yes.
what are you thinking on that front?
Yeah, I'm thinking that they probably will go back to the portal in the spring. That's just kind of my reading of the tea leaves. It's not a knock on the guys they have. They just don't have a lot of experience. I mean, they outside of Hilborn and Dew, I mean, your next most experienced guy is like, Ashton Tripp and Johnny Lester, and those are guys who mostly have played special teams or have played in, mop-up roles late. They just don't have a ton of experience at those spots. And, that's the downside of losing Pole, Tilavea, Kalani, and Fa'amoe. The upside is that, three of those four guys were fine, if not, not very good. Hurts to lose Pole, but, I mean, you can live, I think, without the guys. I know what the rankings say for, a Fa'amoe in particular, but, it was a lot of potential. It wasn't always production. I mean,
look, we talked about in the podcast, like the offensive line got worse when he came back. That's not arguable. That's the truth. And again, it's it's kind of like the Isaiah Watts argument, right? Like maybe it's not his fault per se, but also like correlation may not equal causation, but it's kind of there.
Well, and I think that also contributed to the I don't want to say stupidity, that's strong, but the baffling decision to continue to rotate at guard. I mean,
yes,
they said we're picking 5 guys and going with it, and then they picked 5 guys, and then like a week later started shifting it again, and it never really made sense because Hilborn was always quite superior to Tilavea,
right?
In the eyes of like everyone, I guess, except for the coaches because they kept switching it up, and then they took Tilavea to Wake Forest. I think when you talk about the replacements, I would say right now that I like Noah Dunham's chances to be the other starting guard.
That was another guy I had in mind.
He rose up a little bit last year. He played with
and he's a young guy too.
Yeah,
like that's the other nice thing about him.
Yeah,
a lot of
third
potential
year out
there.
of Yuba City, California. He rose up. I mean, he played with the ones a lot of last fall because Fa'amoe was still coming back, and then Dew was nicked up, and there were just little bumps and bruises. And he looked good. He performed well. I think tackle is where the questions are. There's Johnny Lester who was in a lot of their formations as the 6th lineman last year. He's he's still a walk-on actually out of Spokane. He can also play guard. There's Nick Bakken, who is actually the only SDSU guy to come in on the offensive line. South Dakota State did a great job, I think. They got their freshmen into games last year. Like Bakken, and then you look at like on the defensive side, Fernando Laquona, Trey Ridley, Anthony Polano. Like these guys played 6 or 7 games. They played 3 in the regular season, and they played the playoffs because those don't count against your red shirt. Maxwell Woods, same thing at running back. So Bakken's a guy who has a little bit of game experience, but again, it's not extensive. It's not in crunch time. It's hey, we're up 56-0 on whoever. You're going to get
right,
which is good and I think helps. But Ashton Tripp I think will be in that mix at tackle. Xavier Thorpe's a young guy who, on one hand, looked pretty impressive in a lot of his fall camp stuff. And Dickert absolutely raved about it. On the other hand, there's a reason there was the Jake Dickert traveling all-stars of guys that he, praised to all ends of the earth that didn't end up panning out. And I'm not at all saying Thorpe is one of those guys or any of the guys he necessarily praised, but there were guys over the years, that he bestowed all kinds of praise on that either weren't very good or didn't end up doing anything. So, and the other ultimate part of this is you're looking at 2 different coaching staffs. They view things differently. And you mentioned Zach Miller. and he's a guy I'm intrigued to watch this spring, because I know that the past staff kind of felt like, okay, this is kind of where he is. He's kind of hit his plateau. This will be his 4th year. They kind of thought this is a solid backup offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Rodgers could come in and say, or maybe not so much Rodgers, but Freund and Taylor Lucas, the O-line coach, could say, absolutely not. This guy has a chance to be great. You already saw it with Warren Smith in the secondary. He was gone before Dickert left. And this staff said, no, we'd like you to come back,
Yeah.
And he did. So sometimes those kinds of things happen where,
Yeah.
The coaching staff says, no, we want you to stay. And maybe that ends up being the case with Miller, but I think he'll be in there. Guys like Chris Leno and Carson Osmus, they were, true freshmen last year. They redshirted, maybe kind of in that next wave. We didn't see a ton of them last year in terms of getting reps outside the scout team. And then Nathan Pritchard's another one at guard who kind of probably, again, haven't seen a ton of. He's kind of usually been, the second, third string guard on the right side. Maybe more so towards the 3. So I think it'll be interesting to see where those guys all mix in, though, because I do think, there is 3 positions that, in my opinion, are extremely wide open.
Yeah.
And I do think that they're going to, probably want to add a portal guy just purely off of experience. I think you've got to have more than 2 guys who have played extensive college. I mean, not even talking about FBS or Power 5, but just college
totally
football
agree
snap.
with you. Yeah, totally agree with you on that. Is there any sense? So last question for you on this one. Is there any sense that their offensive philosophy is going to be a little different than what we've been used to, right? Right. So is there a sense then that they're looking for a bit different skill set on offense or on offensive line? And does that mean that maybe there's a guy like maybe Miller, right? That was a name that was mentioned. Is there a guy maybe in there that we're not like thinking, oh yeah, this guy might be really good, but maybe the coaching staff is looking at his skill set and being like, this could really work for us. Cause we're more looking for road grader type guys and less, nimble pass protector type folks.
Oh, there absolutely could be. I look at a guy like Chris Leno, who's 6'8", 325, does that translate to a pure pass blocking, off of the tackle? Maybe not, because he may not have the quick feet enough to do so. You saw that issue at times with Pole, really, in 2023. This year he was stellar, but, there absolutely could be guys like Miller who, maybe the past staff didn't think would be a fit for an air raid style offense with a lot of pass blocking. But this time would say, yeah, this guy can absolutely run block.
Yeah, can we move bodies? Right?
Exactly. And a guy that size, I think 6'7", probably about 300 pounds, there's an argument to be made that he absolutely could be what they're looking for in that. So I do think that will be another kind of thing that's interesting to monitor is, how much do some of these guys, do any of the returners, do their roles change just because a different coaching staff views them in a different light and thinks, no, I think they can be, they can do this or they can do that, where, again, the previous staff, they'd obviously knew what they wanted in certain guys. I think you'll see it in recruiting too. There were guys that, probably wouldn't have been takes for the Dickert staff for reason X, Y, or Z. And there were guys that, there's every time there's a coaching change, there may have been guys that the Dickert staff wanted in recruiting that this staff said, no, I think we're okay. So, it happened when Dickert took over for Rolovich. It happens everywhere. It just, there's the fit aspect that always, maybe that word gets overused, but it does matter.
It does matter, for sure.
And I think, you look at a Caleb Franzel at linebacker, 6'3", 195 pounds, or 6'1", 195 pounds. There's no way the Jake Dickert staff's taking a linebacker of that size.
Right.
Ironically, they took Jovan Clark, who is kind of in that mold, but they were probably going to get him closer to 220, 225, maybe even 230. Whereas Wazoo's probably saying 5'11", 200 pounds, that's what we want in our Sam. So different schemes, different skill sets, different sizes. There's a lot of different things that go into it.
Yep, no doubt. All right, let's wrap up with this. Let's wrap up with some women's basketball, because maybe we should have started with that. I don't know. That's happier. It's much happier. Yes. Now the competition is a tad bit weaker in the WCC on the women's side. That's not a super strong conference over there, which is, to our benefit. Funny thing is, like, the men's basketball team right now on Bart Torvik is ranked, I don't know, 105, 110, something like that. The women's team is ranked like 109, and yet the women's team is 18-12 and 13-6 in the WCC because there are no, 2,000-pound gorillas in that league. And so nice little weekend, nice tidy weekend. Like wins over San Francisco and St. Mary's at home. Neither game blowouts, but also, both games, they sort of were comfortable at the end. I think I watched some of San Francisco. That game was real tight in the first half, and then we kind of blew them out in the second half.
Which has really been
behind in the first half.
It's really been the story of their season is, there's been a couple, obviously, outliers, but for the most part, they allow a team to hang around. They kind of feel it out. And then I think what you see, with the exception of the games against Gonzaga and Portland, obviously, when they get into the second half, their talent just kind of shines out. It's like, okay, we've got L.A. Villas, and who was recruited to play in the Pac-12. And, we've got a Diana Mendez whose athleticism and upside isn't matched by anyone. We've got these players that, we've got Tara Wallach, who played a role on a team that won the Pac-12 tournament and, played a major role on 2 NCAA tournament teams. Like, other teams don't have that, and you start to see that. And there's, there's a reason that, they've got 6 losses in conference, 4 to Gonzaga and Portland, 1 early one to Santa Clara that they want back, and then 1 just nightmare to LMU, in which there were some interesting whistles that didn't exactly go their way.
That OT loss to Gonzaga makes you want to throw a computer.
Oh, great game! I was up there at that game in the kennel, and man, it was fun, and it was so funny because the first 10, 12 minutes were just awful. It was like 17-8. No one could hit a shot, and no one was even close. And then both teams settled in, and and I think that's what gives you some optimism. They played. I mean, Portland got them actually. They actually played worse against Portland than they did Gonzaga, but they don't play until Sunday. You assume based on the season that they'll be able to take care of whoever they play on Sunday, and then it's as simple. I mean, Cammie said it best on Saturday. It's kill or be killed. I mean, there's no the last few years were okay if they do this, do they get the at-large bid? I mean, it's you win the conference tournament and you're in, otherwise you're not. Yeah, that's reference to WCC. It's a one, and
it's a very winnable conference tournament. Absolutely. I mean, that's the other thing. And right now they sit in third place. Mm-hmm. They win their final game. They're locked into third place.
They're locked in right now. Just for
are they locked in right now?
Yeah, they cannot, because I think Oregon State can tie them on record, but they swept the Bees. So they
that makes sense.
Tomorrow's game they play Pepperdine at 1 it's fairly inconsequential unless you start getting into the weeds of what do you need to make, like the WBIT, etc. They can't go up and down in the seeding. Yeah, they're the 3 seed, which is, again, you're off until Sunday. You get to face a tired team, and then it's most likely beat Portland, beat Gonzaga. You do that, you're in.
Yeah, and those are 2 really beatable teams that they've been there with the whole time. And this team is, they're young, but they're like, you kind of go, okay, well, you're at the end of the season. It's the old cliche, right? The freshmen are not freshmen anymore, right? Like people love saying that sort of thing, but they love saying it because there's a kernel of truth in it, right? Which is, at this point in the season, you kind of know what to do, you know what to expect, and it's time for the lights to come on. If Mendez can somehow figure out how to stay out of foul trouble, because truly, and I think as we're looking at her, and thinking about the men's team, like, honestly, she is the sort of player that the men's team lacks, right? Which is a player who is athletically able to impose their will in a game. And I think, like, when we talk about Cedric Coward, I do think that that's the one. I'm a little less sympathetic to the argument about Coward, simply because I'm just like, I don't know, man, players get hurt. You got to figure shit out.
Sure.
But also at the same time, I'm sympathetic to the idea that, he really was the one guy on the roster who could impose his will on a game. And last year we saw, how important that is with, if you just, honestly, the difference between last year and, Kyle's previous two teams, right? 2022, 2023, really, I think the only major difference is they had two bucket getters.
Yeah.
Like they had two guys who, if you need a bucket, could go get a bucket. If you need a bucket, give it to Isaac, let him go to work. You need a bucket, give it to Jalen, let him go to work. Now, Jalen's mostly a catch and shoot shooter,
right,
but also like crafty in the mid range. Like he could go get you a bucket if he needed to. And they just, for so many years, 2022 is a great example. Michael Flowers, for all of his, all the things he did well, he's still 5'10", and then you had next to him another guy's like 5'8", and it's like, okay, so you got these two guys, go get a bucket, right? Think shorter than 5'8", 5'6", whatever.
Maybe 5'8's probably right.
Yeah. So
talk about how many big shots did Miles hit too?
Yeah, totally. And so you just kind of go, you got guys who can go get buckets, and right now the men's team doesn't have that. So back to the women's team. We're talking about the men, but back to the women's team. Tara Wallett can go get you a bucket. Mendez ultimately, like really athletically, can just go get you a bucket.
Yeah.
Right. Tara's crafty. Mendez is like she can literally just take over a game if she sort of figures things out. Now she's very unlikely to sort of like put it all together now. That's probably next season, but at the same time, she still can do that. And so like if she can somehow figure out a way to stay on the floor, which is a challenge in the women's game, it's tougher in the women's game. They're officiated a little differently.
Terribly is the word you're looking for.
That's another word I might be looking for. But, bigs in the men's game, we do see it from time to time when you have bigs who are big and strong.
Yeah.
They do pick up fouls for just being big and strong. But in the women's game, it's even more. Because there just aren't that many big and strong players. And so the big and strong players tend to pick up a lot of fouls. And it's very frustrating. I know Cammie's been frustrated with it at times with the way it's been officiated.
I talked to Charlotte on, I guess it was Tuesday, which is yesterday when we were recording, and I asked her, what was one of your biggest adjustments, and she said, I did adjusting to how the game's called, and it's my favorite game to play every year, and this has been going on since
the international players.
The first couple games, they will just like I think it was the first game, Marta picked up a couple fouls, and she's a really physical defender and a really good defender.
Yep.
And there was one or two where she was just like, wait, what? Like it was a hand check or
something.
And it was just like, wait, that's a foul. Like they can't believe it because they're not used to that.
Right.
But I think, Mendez is a great example where she does things that are so uncommon in the women's game, just on a sheer athleticism standpoint and physicality standpoint, that, oh no, that's got to be a foul. There's
and particularly in the WCC, right? Like,
yes,
if she was playing in the Pac-12, the former Pac-12, it wouldn't, where those guys, those folks are reffing, Juju Watkins and whatever on a nightly basis.
Like
WCC,
you look at a pure athleticism standpoint, like I'm sure there might be one or two others that rival, but the only person on an athletic standpoint that I think can truly match with Mendez in the conference is Ejim at Gonzaga, who's, an 18th year senior and is the best scorer in their history. Like as great as, and Portland's got great players, but they don't have that mind numbing athleticism.
Yes.
That Mendez has. So it's like you don't see players and a player like Ejim is going to get the benefit of the whistles because, again, she's been there for 6 years. She's going to get the friendlier whistle. That's just how it works. Yep. But people haven't seen a player like Mendez very often. Officials haven't. They're just like, wait, what do we do with this player? I think it was you who would always tweet about how many times is TJ Bamba get called for a foul because he's bigger and stronger and more of an absolute beast than everybody in the paint.
Yep.
How many times did Mo get called for a foul because he's 6'11" and can jump out of the gym? Like there is an aspect where, the stocky 5'7" ref doesn't really know what to do with that kind of player.
It's true. And particularly in the women's game, the officiating in the women's game is definitely a notch below the officiating in the men's game,
which is also awful, but
which is also not great. So it can be a little bit of a roll of the dice. So assuming they stay in the top 3, they got Pepperdine. I'm looking at the standings right now. Oregon State is a game and a half behind. So I guess if we lost and Oregon State won both their games, but like you said, we swept them. So I think we're locked into 3 no matter what, which is great. That could put you against, so Portland and Gonzaga both 15-3. So I don't know. I've not looked.
Gonzaga's got the tiebreaker.
They've got the tiebreaker.
They swept Portland, so
I will say Portland's got to play San Francisco, which is 5th place team, while Gonzaga plays Pacific, which is 6th place team. So there still could be some weird stuff there. But either way, I don't think it really matters.
And they actually
which team ends up 1-2. Honestly, for us, I don't know. Like, is your opinion? I mean, just like in 30 seconds, like, do you see Gonzaga or Portland, either one of them, being a preferred opponent in the semis?
I would rather them see Gonzaga in the semis with the hope that someone else can extinguish Portland. Because Portland is so old and and they've won the last 2 WCC tournaments. There's a reason for that.
That's a good point.
Austin Getz of SWX said, all Coug fans, if they play, will be introduced to when Portland's best player, Maisie Burnham, becomes, and I quote, Thanos at the WCC tournament.
Yes, I would like to avoid Thanos, if I'm just being honest.
So both those teams still have 2 games. So Portland's got to do, obviously, if Portland needs Gonzaga to lose 1 more, and then they've got to sweep. And I think Wazoo's played Gonzaga tighter than Portland, and then you hope that San Francisco or whoever, or Oregon State can. I mean, Oregon State got Portland earlier in the year, and maybe you can, they can do you a favor, something like that. But I think it's in all likelihood, if you're gonna win the conference tournament, you're gonna have to beat both. I don't. Yeah,
you're gonna have to go through at least one
scenario where, again, maybe the 4 seed pool. I mean, San Francisco did just beat Gonzaga on their own floor, so it does happen. But in all likelihood, you will have to beat both if you want to get to the to the conference tournament, or to the NCAA tournament. Yeah, no, they're locked in the 3. Obviously, the men should get to the 6th seed, but all you got to do is beat 2 of the worst 3 teams in the conference and have St. Mary's beat LMU. But
if you get to the 6th seed, you feel like, all right, it's not impossible, right? Like 4 games in 4 days. Teams do that sometimes. I mean, it'd be very unusual, but also maybe at least you allow yourself to dream for a sek. You drop the 7th.
Situation where St. Mary's is already locked in. They're not really worried about it.
I don't know. Although I don't know, man. Everything I know about Randy Bennett suggests that guy's not going to not going to yield 1 inch for 1 second. So
you drop to the 7. You play Pacific. You either beat them by 60 or you lose again. There's no
which that would be. I don't know. Maybe at that point I would be advocating for David Riley to be fired. I would not be able to be held responsible for whatever I said after that
for a 3rd time.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm telling you, there's no middle ground though. If they play Pacific again,
no, I agree.
I agree. Beat the brakes off of them, and it's just like, wait, how did this not happen? Or they lose for a 3rd time. It's not they won by 11 or they won by 8. No, they win by 40 or they lose again.
Yeah, I don't think there's gonna be a middle ground on that. All right, let's wrap it up, dude. So hey, let's start with this. So obviously, folks can find your work at cougfan.com. Both some free stuff, but also VIP, your VIP pass. Where else can folks find your work? Obviously on X. They can find you on X.
On Twitter, they can find
Twitter
at Jamie Vinnick 9. That's JAMEYVINNICK and the number 9. And you can follow. If you're really looking for more of the articles get tweeted out, follow CougFan at CougFan.com. They tweet out more articles than I do.
Yep.
And then, as Jeff said, the site's where you can find it all.
Yeah. Sometimes you're the one doing the tweeting. Sometimes other folks are doing the tweeting. It kind of depends. All right, so you can find my work at or my socials. I no longer post to X, but because Elon Musk is a fucking Nazi and we don't hang with Nazis. But I also understand why other folks might do that to promote their work. And I am on Blue Sky. You can find me on Blue Sky, Nusscoug, NUSSCOUG podcastvseveryone.com, which is a cool Blue Sky thing. So you can find me there. And Jamie, let's sign off, buddy. Go fucking Cougs.
ESC.
Black Lives Matter.
BLM.
Join a union. Get vaccinated. I know. If you can join a union, though, that's what it's all about. Gotta, like, worker solidarity, my man.
Yeah, again, I'll have to defer to you on that one.